Valley.
Blessed are the heavens, for they declare the power of creation. Blessed is the earth, our beloved home, for she is a planet of plenitude. Blessed are the waters thereon, for they give rise to living things. Blessed is the land, for it is the source of life abundant. Blessed is the air we breathe, for it fires us to life and love. Blessed are the beasts of the field, for they are glorious to behold. Blessed are the birds of the air, for they carve a graceful arc in the sky. Blessed are the mountains and seas and valleys, for their variety makes rich our habitat. Blessed are the fields of grain, the orchards of fruit, for they give sustenance, asking nothing in return. Blessed are the dwellers on earth, for they cherish the privilege of living upon it. Blessed are they who protect the earth and all her creatures, from the plants of the field to the trees of the forest, for their reward shall be harmony with the web of existence. Rejoice and be glad, for the earth and her people are one.
The chalice will now be lit in the sanctuary. If you have your own chalice, please light it now too, and let us know that you've done so by typing in the chat. This morning's chalice lighting words are by Adrian Rich. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. Now, please join me in saying the unison affirmation. The words will appear on your screen. Inspired by love, our mission is to seek our true nature, connect deeply and openly, and act for justice. Please join.
Thoreau spent years of his life living in the woods, away from human society. Thoreau's one we usually count as Unitarian. Certainly he hung out with a number of Unitarians in and around Concord, Massachusetts. Thoreau's back to nature experiment was documented in that book, Walden. I was in seminary at the time of this particular visit to New England, and it really came to be something of a pilgrimage for me. Walden was an important stop on that pilgrimage. There's a number of things to bear in mind about Thoreau in Walden, some of which he didn't actually put in his books. However, we know from the assiduous journals of his good friend Ralph Waldo Emerson that it was not uncommon for Henry David to have supper at the Emerson house. It was also well-known practice for Emerson's wife to leave a pie or other food on the windowsill for our valiant hermit to come out and get something to eat. So we aren't talking life below zero here, or man versus wild with Thoreau as some precursor to Bear Grylls. Sure, he was roughing it, but there was a safety net there for him. Still, the poetry of Walden is compelling. My friend and I were hiking in the woods and found that clearing that was Thoreau's home. It is incredibly small. Of course, we had to go the full 9 yards and brought along a copy of Walden, which we would stop periodically along the trail and read aloud sections. Sort of cheesy, but it was a ton of fun. I dare say that the spirit of the modern environmental movement can trace one of its ancestors back to Thoreau's experimenting book. He speaks eloquently about the need to go backwards as a society, instead of always assuming that moving forward is the way to go. Thoreau is writing at the very beginning of the Industrial Revolution in America. He sees where things are headed in terms of urban living, overconsumption, and how achieving more and more wealth is the driving force of humankind, it seems. His was one of the first rebellions against that inevitable march toward uber capitalism. Later, he would withhold paying a tax that he felt would fund the war in Mexico, which he objected to. So he spent the night in jail and wrote Civil Disobedience. Thus, he's the spiritual ancestor to leaders like Dr. King and Gandhi as well. Thoreau, like him or not, is an extraordinarily influential figure. And here I am, standing in the woods, which he made so famous, reading words that he wrote perhaps while standing in the very spot I am in. Ah, he writes, I need solitude. I have come forth to this hill at sunset to see the forms of the mountains and the horizon, to behold and commune with something grander than humanity. Their mere distance and unprofaneness is an infinite encouragement. It is with infinite yearning and aspiration that I seek solitude, more and more resolved and strong, but with a certain weakness that I seek society ever. End quote. It is inspiring words like this which have influenced the generations who have come after Thoreau. He seeks to instill in us a love of nature, a love of the earth, a love for the whole abstract, interconnected mess of things that maybe don't fit well into our human created categories. Good, says Thoreau. It's more important to love the earth than to understand it in all its infinite detail. And thus the seeds of the first Earth Day were sown. Earth Day is a holiday that really came about because people started taking Thoreau's advice seriously. Rather than looking at the earth as an object to be understood rationally, eventually people became moved to love it for its own sake. Now, of course, the two perspectives are not mutually exclusive. Indeed, they often do go together. We want to explore and understand things through science because we love it at some level. I saw in the news the other day that bird watching has been one of the pandemic hobbies that has boomed in the past year. And why not? It's safe and it's socially distanced. I used to watch birds when I would hike in Texas. Studying something in nature like birds means we not only learn new information, but that our heart is moved by it as well. Birders love birds. That's why they study them and travel to go see them. When we put love or concern into the mix, then the earth is not merely an object of scientific study or the world to be dominated, as scripture would tell us, but our home, which we love. And if we love it, then we need to preserve it. I'm sure I am shocking no one this morning when I share with you just how in peril the earth is, particularly in regard to greenhouse gases and climate change. Pollution and other harmful emissions into the atmosphere are creating unimaginable harm to the only planet we know that can sustain life. The reasons and causes are many, but those are the grim scientific facts that we are faced with. In our meditation this morning, Jay Michelson says that it's important to do our part. Each of us as individuals can do better and be better at reducing our carbon footprint as a sort of spiritual practice that honors Mother Earth and all she gives us. However, if we're really looking at cold hard facts, then we cannot overlook that 71% of the greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere come from just 100 global corporations, most of them in the fossil fuel industry. We should certainly do our best individually, Michelson counsels us, but if we really want to make a lasting and significant impact, and boy, do we need to make a lasting and significant impact, then we need to address the big corporate polluters. We could pass laws, but a lot of this stuff happens internationally where the laws of one country don't necessarily reach. That's probably quite intentional. What we really need is for the nations of the world to come together to set standards for themselves around greenhouse gas emissions when they will reach those goals and hold each other accountable for clearing things up. In 2015, 86 nations, including the two biggest polluters in the world, China and the United States, came together in Paris to create such an agreement. We call that international agreement the Paris Accords or the Paris Climate Change. We heard it from our reading this morning. The idea is actually quite benign. Each country sets its own standards. No one imposes a standard onto another country. They come up with their own time frame as to when they will meet those standards. Of course, all of it needs to be done, but of course, there's issues that are more pressing than others. I certainly understand that. Where it gets interesting to me, though, is when it talks about accountability at the very end. It's all nice and good to make sweet promises to each other, but how will we hold ourselves accountable if someone falls short? Peer pressure from other nations of the world. I have to say, I was somewhat unimpressed with that last part of the agreement. It seemed pretty weak leverage point to enforce global climate change initiatives, just so you don't become a pariah on the world stage. Brings up the old ethical dilemma. Are we good because of some internal virtuous nature, or are we good because we know we'll get caught if we break the rules? The policing of this seems a tad naive. Certainly, we see this in America, where one political party seems to think that climate change is a hoax, and the other sees it as an important scientific and economic issue. Fortunately, one of the very first executive orders that President Biden signed was to have the United States rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement. President Trump didn't like the Paris Agreement, and President Biden does. One man presumably cares something for the environment, while the other clearly did not. What's the difference? Well, certainly accepting or not accepting science is a crucial part of it. I saw on Earth Day that President Biden sent a message out on Facebook that said, "Science is important again in America." That's certainly a good thing, but yet that should be our minimum expectation. Of course, we should believe in substantiated scientific fact. Only the most underdeveloped faith sees itself in conflict with the claims of science. Of science and religion, the two deal in very different jurisdictions. There is no conflict between them, really. What we really need is personal virtue in addition to science. We need to love the earth as Thoreau did, not just see it as a source of money and profit. And when we love something, we want to see it thrive. We want to see that which we love do well and prosper. We need to have that wider perspective that Amanda Gorman expresses so eloquently in our video today. It's an expansive vision that affirms not only science, but the ethical application of science to preserve our environment. It reminds me of something that happened to my friend Trevor. Trevor and I went to high school together, and we occasionally see each other around town. Trevor and his wife Sue have a little girl, a little one. I don't really know her exact age. But anyway, for a recent anniversary present, Trevor bought his wife one of the Keurig machines, you know, the ones that have the little pods that spit out 1 cup of coffee per pod. It tastes terrible, but they're super convenient. They're also terrible for the environment. 1 pod goes into a landfill forever after that quick cup of coffee is consumed. Well, another month goes by, and Trevor loves this thing. He secretly bought it for himself, to be honest. He's buying flavored coffee, Starbucks, the fancy stuff that he wouldn't normally pay what Starbucks charges for coffee. But this feels like he's getting a deal, like he's secretly stealing something, beating the system. This Keurig business is a good thing. Well, another month goes by, and Trevor gets that sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach, a feeling a lot of married guys are familiar with. It's the feeling that the wife is not happy, and I'm not 100% sure why. I mean, I've probably a million reasons why, but potentially. But what did I do? Trevor asked himself. Well, it wasn't really what Trevor had done. It was what Sue had seen this K-cup nonsense produce. It was 2 months worth of these nasty pods that just accumulated in the trash. She had been taking out the trash that morning and saw just how many of these pods that her household was cranking out. A little math in her head had Sue concerned. If they're throwing away this many pods in 1 week, how many in a month, in a year? And surely these things are not biodegradable. Apparently there are some that are more environmentally friendly, I hear, which is good, but Trevor didn't know to buy those. He was too busy stealing coffee away from Starbucks in his mind. Well, the next morning, Sue and Trevor have a conversation about coffee. We need to live out our values. We can't keep polluting the earth this way, she said. And Trevor countered that with the big corporations are doing far worse. Yeah, well, we don't run those corporations. We run this house, Sue countered. And so the K-cup machine was destroyed. I never learned how, because it doesn't help the environment just to give it to someone else to pollute the earth with it. Now Trevor had to make his coffee in a French press, which was environmentally much friendlier, but took a long time, particularly in the morning when he craved that first cup. Well, it was shortly after the Keurig machine met its untimely demise when Trevor was leisurely making coffee in his new French press on a Saturday morning. His daughter came down the stairs and saw that he was kind of pushing on this handle. And she asked him, "What is that?" He told her and kind of explained how it works. His daughter asked why they were making coffee like that when it was clearly slower. Why not just use the filters or those little cuppy things, as she called them? And before he knew it, Trevor was repeating everything Sue had told him before. The filters and the cups go in the trash and they never go away. We pollute the earth that way, and we want to protect the earth because it's our home. He felt like a regular John Muir in that moment. His daughter gave him a big hug and said she was proud of her dad and wanted to protect Mother Earth too. Well, needless to say, Trevor was beaming. Proud of me. That's the ultimate for dads. You know, Trevor reflected, teaching the next generation about the environment may have been as beneficial as getting rid of the machine itself. Instilling the love of the earth in his daughter and demonstrating how that love is lived out in a very concrete way may have transformed her outlook of the world. She'll spend the rest of her life with that lens, looking for ways that she can be a better steward of the earth. Us dads can get a little grandiose when it comes to parenting when we score a win. Later, he also remembered, once he got over being puffed up about his daughter being so proud of his actions, that everything he had said and did were directly because Sue had either said it first or told him to do it. Most wise men I know are wise because they listen to their wise women. Thoreau said, as it is important to consider nature from the point of view of science, remembering nomenclature and system of humans, and so if possible, go a step further in that direction. So it is equally important to ignore or forget all that people presume they know and take an original and unprejudiced view of nature, letting her make what impression she will on you, as the first people and all children and natural people still do. It is important to behave in ways that live out our values if we love the earth. And we need to keep our focus on the big corporations who are the source of some of the worst harm being done to the earth. We'll do this by creating a culture that values the earth for its own sake, not just because we might look bad in front of the other nations of the world when the Queen of England invites us over for tea or something like that. We have to be good because it is the right thing to do every day and all the time. In other words, we need to think locally but act globally. May we be ever vigilant in our spiritual practice of loving the earth. May we never lose a global, if not cosmic, perspective on the world. And may we instill a culture and expectation of sustainability into the next generation and beyond. I love you. Happy Earth Day. Amen. I invite you now.
Today's offering will also be shared with the SPCA of Westchester. Please refer to our website or to our newsletter for more information. You can make your donation via credit card or PayPal using the links in your in your newsletter or again on the website. Please remember to give a little extra to compensate for the 3% surcharge. There is also a link in the chat that you can use as well. Or of course, if you prefer, you can always mail us a check. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.